I can still hear the throne. It's not a sound you forget. It's not the roar of a starship's engine, or the crack of a bolter, or the choir of a cathedral. No, it is a wet thing. A biological sound. The sound of 1 billion tons of flesh and metal and psychic will grinding together in a perpetual, agonized systole and diastole. A heartbeat that is not a heartbeat. A machine that is not a machine. I smell it too. Even here, light years away, in the cold, sterile air of my chambers, the scent clings to my memory, to the fibers of my robes, to the very keratin of my nails. It is the smell of ozone and incense. Yes, the public fragrances of divinity. But underneath, it is the smell of cooked meat, of static, of old, rusted iron and the sweet, cloying rot of a forgotten bloom. They think he sits upon a golden chair. They are not wrong. But they do not understand that the gold is a cage, and the thing inside, the thing that beats and pumps and screams without ever making a sound, that is what we were built to serve. And it all began with a truth. A single, poisoned truth, offered to us like a sacrament. This is not a story of glory. It is a confession. A chronicle of the day our Father, the God Emperor of mankind, looked upon his 20 sons and decided, for the first and last time, to be honest. And in that honesty, he planted the seed of our damnation. We were summoned to Terra. Not to the war room, or the strategium, or the practice cages. No. We were called to the inner sanctum, a place so deep within the palace it had no name, only a designation, the Athenium. The air there was different, thinner, yet heavier. It pressed upon you not with weight, but with age. You breathed in dust from epochs that had no name, molecules of forgotten kings and extinct civilizations. The light was a dull, bronze glow, emanating from no visible source, casting long, stubborn shadows that seemed more real than the objects that birthed them. I was one of the first to arrive. I have always been punctual. A flaw, perhaps. It gave me time to observe, to catalog the unease. Lion L. Johnson stood like a statue carved from a forest at midnight, his stillness a weapon. He did not look at me, or at Robold Dorn who entered shortly after, his face a fortress of grim certainty. The lion's eyes were fixed on the far wall, or perhaps on something beyond it. He smelled of damp earth and cold stone. Then came Fulgrim, a symphony in lavender and gold, his perfume a defiant challenge to the tomb air. He wrinkled his perfect nose, a minuscule crack in his composure. Such a dreary place for a family gathering, he murmured, and his voice was like oil on water. They came, one by one. My brothers. A pantheon of freaks and demigods, assembled in a room that felt less like a chamber and more like a dissection table. Lehman Russ, smelling of Fenrisian ale and frostwolf fur, his boisterousness muted by the oppressive silence. The Khan, a silent vortex of motionless speed, his eyes missing nothing. Sanguinius, whose glorious wings seemed to absorb the sickly light and reflect it back as pure radiance. He offered me a small, troubled smile. I could not return it. Magnus was the last to arrive. His one eye burned with a fierce, intellectual fire. He was eager. He knew this was about knowledge, and he hungered for it like a man starving for air. We were 20 pillars of flesh and ego, standing in a circle. A completed set. For the first time in the long, bloody centuries of the Great Crusade, all the Primarchs were in one room. It should have been a moment of triumph. It felt like a prelude to an execution. And then he was there. No doors opened. No light flashed. He was simply present. A figure of gold and shadow, taller than memory, more solid than reality. The air bent around him, whimpering. You felt his presence not as a sight or a sound, but as a fundamental shift in the physics of your soul. The temperature did not change, and yet, I felt a cold sweat prickle on my scalp. He did not speak. Not at first. His gaze swept over us, and it was like being scanned by a Xeno's weapon, flayed open, every thought, every sin, every secret ambition laid bare on the cold stone floor. I saw Perturabo flinch. I saw Angren's teeth grind, the butcher's nails humming in his skull like angry wasps. I saw Horus, dear, Proud Horus straightened his back, a perfect son awaiting a perfect command. When the Emperor's voice finally came, it was not a sound that traveled through the air. It was a stone dropped into the well of our minds, and the ripples were his words. My sons. The two words contained galaxies of meaning. Pride. Disappointment. Warning. Love. It was a love that felt like the heat from a star, necessary for life, but capable of utter annihilation. You have pushed the boundaries of our Imperium to the edge of the galaxy. You have broken empires and brought light to the dark. You believe you understand the nature of this universe. You are wrong. A ripple of unease. Mordorion let out a soft, rattling breath. Corix, standing in the deepest shadow, seemed to merge with it further. There is a dimension that underlies our own. A sea of unreality upon which the material universe floats like a fragile film. You have felt its touch. You have called it the Immaterium, the Empyrean, the warp. These are insufficient words for an infinite truth. Magnus was leaning forward, his single eye wide. The great ocean, he whispered, and the Emperor's gaze settled on him. Yes, the great ocean. A source of power for our navigators, for our astropaths. For you, Magnus. For some of you. But you have only sailed its placid surfaces. You have not seen the depths. You have not met the things that hunger in the abyss. The bronze light in the Athenium seemed to dim. The shadows grew thicker, more substantive. Today you will. Today, you will see what waits in the dark. Not Xenos. Not rebels. Not simple beasts. But predators of a kind so ancient and so malevolent, that to know them is to risk your very soul. Horus took a step forward. Father, we have faced every horror the galaxy has to offer. We do not fear. You will. The single word struck Horus like a physical blow. He staggered back, his face a mask of shock and wounded pride. What you call demons are real. They are not legends. They are not metaphors. They are living, thinking, hungering things. And they are the least of the dangers. For in the depths of this Empyrean, there are intelligences. Vast, timeless, infinite. They are not gods. To call them such is to grant them a power they crave but do not inherently possess. They are parasites, sentient patterns of entropy. They are the final, terrible truth of the universe, that all order yearns for chaos, all life for death, all hope for despair. I could feel it then, a pressure building in the room, a psychic pressure. The Emperor was not just telling us. He was showing us. They have names, these parasites. Names are power. To know a name is to grant it a hook into your soul. I will not speak them, but I will show you their faces. I will show you their work. The world dissolved. The floor vanished. The walls vanished. We were no longer in the Athenium. We were nowhere. And everywhere. We floated in a maelstrom of impossible colors and non-Euclidean geometry. It was the warp, but not as I had ever seen it through a Gellerfield viewport. This was raw. Unfiltered. The Emperor was holding back the tide with his will alone, creating a bubble of sanity in an ocean of insanity. And in that ocean, things swam. They were not creatures of flesh and blood. They were concepts given form. A pulsating, pink mass of hedonistic excess, all glistening flesh and grinding teeth, whispering promises of perfect sensation. A thing of rusted metal and pestilent filth, buzzing with flies that were also tiny, shrieking faces, preaching the gospel of despair and the comfort of decay. A being of pure, crystalline change, a kaleidoscope of blades and feathers, screaming its mantra of anarchy and revolution. And behind them a fourth, a shadow of shadows, a promise of perfect, absolute, and final order. A silence so profound it was a scream. I could taste them. The first was like spoiled wine and sugar, cloying and addictive. The second was the taste of a licked battery and a gangrenous wound. The third was ozone and hot blood. The fourth was nothing. The taste of static. Of a vacuum. I could feel them. The brush of phantom limbs, the caress of rotting fingers, the kiss of a razor against my soul. This was the truth. This was the enemy. The reaction among my brothers was catastrophic. Angron was on his knees, roaring, not in rage, but in raw, psychic pain. The butcher's nails were a symphony of agony in his brain, and the presence of these entities was amplifying it 1,000-fold. Conrad Kurz was laughing, a dry, cracking sound. Yes, yes. I have seen them in my dreams. The faces in the dark. Lorgar Aurelian had tears streaming down his face. But they were not tears of horror. They were tears of rapture. He was looking upon the things we were told to hate, and he was seeing divinity. Fulgrim was pale, his hand pressed to his mouth, his eyes wide with a terrible, fascinated revulsion. Perturabo was calculating, his mind a whirlwind of fortifications and defenses against an enemy that could walk through walls. The lion was a rock, unmoved, but I saw his hand clenched so tightly around his sword hilt that the ceramite of his gauntlet groaned. And Magnus was enraptured. He reached out a hand, as if to touch the kaleidoscope of change. So much power, he breathed. Father, the knowledge. It is a lie. The vision shattered. We were back in the Athenaeum, stumbling, gasping. Several of my brothers were vomiting onto the flawless stone floor. The air stank of bile and ozone. They are the enemy. Their only desire is to feed upon you, to use you, to make you a puppet for their cosmic hunger. They will offer you power. They will offer you truth. They will offer you everything you have ever desired. It is a trap. Your will is your only shield. Your ignorance was your armor. Now you must forge a new one. From this moment, the Great Crusade has a new, primary objective. Not just compliance. Not just expansion. But the utter annihilation of this threat. You will seek out their cults. You will burn their influences. You will deny them, always and forever. You are my sons. You are the only beings in this galaxy with the strength to face this. Do not fail me. He was gone. As suddenly as he had appeared. The pressure vanished. The silence that followed was louder than any war scream. We were left alone. 20 demigods, poisoned with a truth we could never unknow. The galaxy did not change. The stars still burned. Worlds still turned. But we had changed. We had been given a key to a door we were never meant to open, and now every shadow held a new shape. The Great Crusade continued. But it was different. A slow, creeping sickness had entered our hearts. I saw it in my brothers. I saw it in myself. Lorgar secluded himself, emerging only to preach a new, darker gospel. His legion, the word-bearers, began to incorporate new symbols into their armor and their chapels. He claimed they were wards. They looked like invitations. Fulgrim became obsessed with perfection, with chasing sensations so extreme they might blot out the memory of those glistening, hungry things. His Palatine phoenixes began to pursue art forms that were unsettling. Sculptures that wept blood. Symphonies that drove the listeners to frenzy or catatonia. Perturabo's sieges became exercises in absolute, grinding annihilation. He would spend the lives of his iron warriors not for victory, but for the creation of a perfect, geometric ruin. A testament to entropy. Angren's rages became more profound, more cosmic. He wasn't just killing enemies. He was offering their skulls to the roaring in his head, a roaring that now had a shape, a name he almost remembered. And Horus, dear Horus, the Emperor's honest son. He took the burden hardest of all. The weight of this knowledge bent him. He became withdrawn, paranoid. He saw heresy in every delayed report, corruption in every compliant world that showed the slightest cultural resistance. The Luna Wolves' compliance became a brutal, efficient slaughter. He was trying to build a wall of corpses to hold back the sea he had shown us. My own legion, it does not matter now. We were seekers of lore, keepers of secrets, and now we had the ultimate secret. I locked myself in my archives, scouring every text, every data slate, every piece of xenology for hints, for clues, for any mention of the fourfold lie. I was trying to understand the enemy. But understanding is the first step toward sympathy. I began to dream of the changer of ways. I would wake with the scent of ozone and blood in my nostrils, and diagrams of impossible machinery scrawled on the walls of my chamber in my own handwriting. The worst was the silence. The Emperor, after his grand revelation, became a ghost. He retreated to Terra, to his golden projects, leaving us to fight his war in the dark, with this terrible knowledge festering in our minds. He gave us the disease and offered no cure. We were alone, with the truth. And the truth was starting to talk back. It started with dreams. Vivid, technicolor nightmares that felt more real than waking life. Then, it was the whispers in the warp jump. Every navigator heard them, but we Primarchs, we heard them clearer. They knew our names. They knew our desires. I was in my sanctum, studying a Xenos obelisk that predated the old ones, or so the legends claimed. The air grew cold. You look for answers in dead stone, son of the Corpse King. The answers you seek are not in the past. They are in the future. A future of infinite possibility. A future where you are not a weapon, but a weaver of fates. I slammed my mind shut, like a vault door. The voice laughed, a sound of breaking glass and chiming bells. It was not just me. Ferrus Manus told me his own hands, his living metal hands, would sometimes clench into fists of their own volition, and he would hear the clang of a great blacksmith's hammer on a warp-born anvil. Vulcan confessed he dreamed of a great, green fire that would cleanse the galaxy, not to save it, but to offer its ashes as a pyre to a grandfatherly presence of decay. Sanguinius, my beautiful, doomed brother, his visions of his own death became tangled with visions of a great, winged demon with his face, screaming in eternal, blood-soaked hunger. The knowledge was a crack in our souls. And the ruinous powers were the subtle pressure of the ocean, pushing relentlessly on that crack, waiting for it to split wide open. The first true betrayal was not Horus. It was Lorgar. He had written a new book, the Lectitio Divinitatis. But it was not about the Emperor. Not anymore. It was a twisted, beautiful, horrifying text that spoke of the fourfold path to ascension. It was a Bible for the very things we were meant to destroy. He sent copies to all of us. I held the book in my hands. The leather was warm, like living skin. The pages smelled of sandalwood and rotting parchment. I felt a terrible urge to open it, to read its poisoned verses. I did not. I threw it into the plasma core of my flagship. But I know that others did not. The next time I saw Fulgrim, at a campaign briefing on the world of Chemos, his eyes had a new, feverish glint. He carried a new sword. A beautiful, wicked, serpentine blade. He claimed it was a Xenos artifact of great power. It whispered to him. I could hear it, a sibilant hiss at the edge of my hearing. He was listening. The family was breaking. The truth was a wedge, and the dark gods were the hammer. Why did he tell us? This question became my own personal obsession, a ritual I performed every night as I stared into the void from my viewport. Was it a test? A final, cruel examination of his creations? Was he, in his infinite, cold wisdom, trying to harden us against the storm by forcing us to stare into the eye of the hurricane? Or was it something else? Something more desperate? Perhaps the war in the Wewe, the project he had dedicated himself to on Terra, was going worse than anyone knew. Perhaps he knew he was losing. And in his desperation, he unleashed his 20 generals upon the true enemy, hoping that our might, our will, could achieve what his own vast intellect could not. Or perhaps he saw the corruption already growing in us. In Lorgar's devotion. In Fulgrim's pride. In Angren's rage. In Perturabo's resentment. Perhaps he thought that by revealing the nature of the cancer, we would be shamed into cutting it out ourselves. A foolish hope. You cannot cure a sickness by showing the patient a picture of the virus. You only make the patient hyper-aware of every symptom, every twinge, every feverish dream. You make them see the sickness in everything, especially in themselves. I began to look at my own sons with new eyes. Did that battle brother fight with a little too much relish? Was that a gleam of something other than zeal in that chaplain's eye? The knowledge made me paranoid. It made me cruel. I instituted purges. I demanded psychic screenings. I created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion within my own legion, the very legion built upon trust and shared knowledge. I was becoming a mirror of my father, a distant, feared tyrant, ruling through omens and dread. And the whispers knew it. You see the chains, do you not? The chains of command. The chains of destiny. The chains your father wrapped around your soul at your moment of birth. You are a slave, little god. A slave to a dying man on a painful throne. We offer freedom. The freedom to know. The freedom to change. The freedom to become what you were always meant to be. Oh, the temptation. It was a physical ache in my chest. To cast off the burden. To stop fighting the inevitable. To dive into that kaleidoscope of change and see what I would become. Would I be a creature of pure knowledge? A being of light and thought? Or a screaming column of eyes and tentacles? It did not matter. It would be change. It would be freedom from this endless, grinding war against a truth that was, in the end, the fundamental nature of reality. I was a soldier in a war against entropy itself. And entropy always wins. The point of rupture came on a world whose name has been scoured from Imperial records. It was a joint compliance action. My legion and the word bearers. Lorgar had changed. His once passionate face was now a mask of serene, untouchable certainty. His eyes held galaxies of dark knowledge. He no longer preached the Emperor's divinity. He preached his failure. We stood together on a ridge, looking down at the city we were to bring into compliance. It was a beautiful place, all gleaming spires and flowing water. They do not need to die, brother, Lorgar said, his voice soft, hypnotic. They can be shown the truth. They can be saved. Your truth is a poison, Lorgar. I replied, my hand on my own weapon. Is it? He smiled. A terrible, compassionate thing. The Emperor showed us a horror and told us to hate it. But he never explained why it exists. He never explained that it is a reflection of us, of all sentient life. To fight it is to fight your own soul. To embrace it is to become whole. He looked at me, and his eyes were bottomless pits. He lied to us. He lied by omission for centuries. He only told us the truth when he had no other choice. He fears them. He fears what they represent. He fears that we will see that his path of cold, sterile logic is a dead end. That the only true path to power, to ascension, is through the heart of the storm. I felt the truth of his words, or a version of it, slither into my mind. The Emperor had lied. He had hidden the fundamental truth of the cosmos from his own sons. He had made us fight a war in the dark. Was that the act of a loving father? Or a terrified tyrant? Down in the city, the word-bearers were not attacking. They were marching. In complex, ritual patterns. They were chanting. The air began to hum. The sky began to bleed, the blue fading to a bruised, violent purple. What are you doing, Lorgar? I whispered, horror dawning. I am opening a door, he said calmly. I am giving them a choice. The choice our father never gave us. I saw it then. A tear in the world. A shimmering, impossible wound in the fabric of reality. And through it, I saw the world of shifting colors and screaming light. And things were looking back. And starting to come through. My men were screaming. Not in battle rage, but in pure, undiluted terror. I saw a battle brother of my legion seized by a thing of molten brass and fire, his body twisting, his armor fusing with his flesh, becoming a living statue of agony. Lorgar looked upon it all with beatific peace. I drew my weapon. I pointed it at my brother. He did not even flinch. You can join us, brother. You can have the answers you crave. All of them. Or you can die here, a slave to a lie. This was the moment. The precipice. The knowledge he had given us had led here, to a brother aiming a gun at another brother's heart, while demons poured into the world. The Emperor's truth had not saved us. It had damned us all. I did not fire. I could not. The symmetry of it, the narrative perfection of brother turning on brother, it felt like a play written by the changer of ways himself. To pull the trigger would be to accept the role it had written for me. The logical, knowledge-seeking brother, executing the zealous, faithful brother. A perfect parable. So I lowered my gun. I ordered a full retreat. I abandoned the world to Lorgar and his new gods. That was my true damnation. Not an action, but an inaction. The guilt is a physical weight I carry, heavier than any Terminator plate. I ran. I ran from the truth, from the war, from my brothers. I became a ghost in my own fleet, haunting the corridors, listening to the throne's heartbeat grow louder in my mind. That was decades ago. The heresy you know, the betrayal of Horus, the siege of Terra, that was just the final, bloody act of a play that had already been written. The script was set the moment our Father unveiled the abyss and expected us not to look down. For when you gaze into the abyss, it gazes also into you. And it whispers. It whispers that you were right to look. It tells you that the only real madness was ever believing you could look away. So now I sit, in this cold, sterile room, light years from the throne that beats and pumps and screams. I close my eyes, and I can still see them. My brothers. Not as they were, but as they became. Fulgrim, a serpentine prince of pleasure. Angron, a blood-soaked avatar of rage. Mordorion, a fly-blown god of despair. Magnus, a shattered cyclops of forbidden lore. And Lorgar, the prophet, whose faith was so strong it broke the galaxy. We were his masterpieces, his ultimate weapons. And his ultimate failure. He thought knowledge would arm us. But some truths are not weapons. They are infections. They are sentient, and they breed. He gave us the infection and called it enlightenment. And now the fever burns us all. The final, terrible joke is this. The Emperor, in his ultimate wisdom, did exactly what the dark gods wanted. He introduced us. He made us aware of one another. He showed the predator to the prey, and in doing so, he made the prey infinitely more interesting. He thought he was building an immune system. He was, in fact, cultivating a garden for their delight. And I am the one who understood it all too late. I am the one who saw the pattern, the terrible, beautiful, horrifying pattern, and was too fascinated by its perfection to tear it apart. So listen to me, whoever you are, listening to this ghost confession in the dark. Listen and understand the price of a truth told too soon, or too late, or at all. There is a reason some doors must remain closed. There is a reason some knowledge must remain forbidden. For the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was not convincing the world he didn't exist. It was convincing God to introduce him to his children. And the children, we so love the meeting.